Hello and welcome everyone, this is Calebovitsch coming to you with another episode of Deck Check. About a couple weeks ago I have finally managed to build a cool deck around Firebombs, i.e. putting Firebombs in the opponent's deck. But then Direwolf nerfed Helio and I thought the deck was a goner. Fortunately I did work more on it, and here I give you the Smurf Garden. After several different names for this deck, the main one being Reflection Fireworks, I finally have a cool name for this Firebomb deck, and that is the Smurf Garden. The base idea for this deck came to me a while ago, and this was not initially about a Firebomb deck. It was about a deck that would work around the card Reflection, a card that is seemingly bad because it's a card draw that doesn't generate you card advantage because you also give your opponent a card. So this is a 1-cost primal spell that says both players draw a card, and it has Revenge, which means after you play it, you, instead of putting it in your void, you reshuffle it back into the top 10 cards of your deck and you give it Destiny, meaning if you draw it again, you play it for free and you get to draw another card, which is cool. And I do like revenge spells. I mean, I really like Rebuild, the spell. Well, let's call it a Praxis spell, although it just has time influence to play it. But all of those have very cool effects. Now, Reflection, how can you turn this disadvantage into an advantage? The main way, and that's what I thought initially, was to make the opponent's deck worse, to include some traps for the opponent. I did do a Talir's Unwinding deck a long while ago that included putting a lot of Firebombs and Scorpion traps into the opponent's deck, and then each player reshuffled their deck and each player drew 7 cards, but it was not really there because it was a 4-faction deck. And the initial Praxis idea was there because, well, I needed to have both time for Teacher of Humility, for Amaranth Stinger, and fire for Light Diffuse and other Firebomb generators. But as it stands, I turned it into just a simple, well, not a simple, but a Skycrack deck. So what you want to do here is, I mean, it is a control deck, okay? It is a control deck that can also act kind of mid-rangey and also has tons and tons of randomness and variance written into, well, the fabric of this deck, let's call it. Because if you play a card called Light Diffuse, you get to put 5 Firebombs into the enemy deck. What is a Firebomb, you might ask? Well, dear viewer, a Firebomb is a spell that you put in the opponent's deck, and as soon as they draw a Firebomb, they immediately play it. They deal 5 damage to themselves, unless they have plus spell damage, then it works to their disadvantage, and then they get to draw the next card. So if you put a lot of Firebombs into the opponent's deck, let's say 5, then the opponent still has a 60-70 card deck, and the probability for them to draw a Firebomb in each card draw is quite low. So you have to help the opponent draw more cards, and that is where Reflection comes in. So you put some Firebombs into the opponent's deck, you play Reflection, and that to make them draw a card, later draw a card again, and multiple Reflections just fuel themselves because you draw a card and it's the next one gets you closer to the first one that has Revenge, and then that one, well, plays the second one and allows you to draw a third one perhaps, etc., etc. So that is the small card draw. There is also a big card draw, one of the cards that I initially loved, then hated, and I love it again, and that is Wrath of Caiaphas. It is a 7-costing Seek Answers, kind of, but also better. And because you can pay 2 to swap Wrath of Caiaphas from your hand with a random power card from your deck, doesn't have to be a sigil, usually isn't a sigil, but also has the huge mode for 7 that says each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. If the opponent has Face Aegis, they lose their Face Aegis, they don't discard their hand, they don't draw 7 more cards, but you get to refill anyway. And what is cool about Wrath of Caiaphas is that by playing a lot of 1-costing spells that cause you kind of card disadvantage, you can refill your hand and just fuel out your next turns of aggression. So there is that. Now, the fact of placing firebombs into the opponent's deck itself is difficult because there are not a lot of good cards that put multiple firebombs into the opponent's deck. Now, if you just type in firebomb, you get your light diffuse, which is the base of this deck, kind of, sort of. I'm not counting putting a firebomb into your own deck. Coal Scrounger puts 1 on Entomb. Flame Belcher puts 10 on Infiltrate, but into the bottom half of the opponent's deck, so they will never draw it. Pyrodept almost never works because you're not running many units, so the Onslaught effect doesn't do much. I was running a couple of Mage Breakers in one of the previous versions of this deck because it was a 5 costing torch that also played Unexpected Results, that transformed each copy of a spell of your choice from the enemy deck into firebombs. But a long while ago, playing Unexpected Results was slightly better because you saw how many copies of a spell was left in the opponent's deck. So it also gave you kind of some information on what the opponent had in hand, especially in today's net decking day and age. Because if you know the opponent is running 4 of this, 3 of that, 2 of that, you see how many they have in their void and in their hand, and maybe even how many times they market it. You can guesstimate how many copies of each spell they have in their hand. Right now, you don't see how many copies the opponent has in their deck, so you're just, they can have 1, they can have 4, you don't know. So I went off of Mage Breakers. There is Milos Rebel Bomber, and that is a unit that we are actually using. This is a 3 costing double fire 3/3 charger with Overwhelm. When Milos hits the enemy player, put a firebomb into their deck, and it's a shiny firebomb because I have a shiny copy of Milos, because I got the shiny copy of the campaign. And fun fact, shiny copies go higher into the opponent's deck than non-fire copies. I mean, in the last week of playing this deck, I think I had 3 instances of Milos placing a firebomb and the opponent immediately drawing it in their next draw step. So this is a small joke. So no, PSA, no, shiny don't go higher. Anyway, there's also the forgotten line of text on Milos that some people forget about. When the enemy player gains health, Milos gets that many stats, attack and health. This is putting 1 firebomb in this we've seen, so honestly not a lot of ways of putting those firebombs into the opponent's deck. But even if you play Light Diffuse, you're not getting your opponent to draw their entire deck, and you only have 4 copies of Light Diffuse to play. So here is where a card called Reread comes in very handy, and I got this interaction from my second attempt at building a Last Light Judgment deck, this time in Throne, that was also running Rereads. And Reread is a 2 costing primal slow spell that draws a spell from your void, and the spell gets void bound. And I found in that deck that if you have a cheap spell that is a centerpiece of your combo, let's call it, and you want to play it multiple times, then Reread is your perfect choice. Here in this version, I've included just 3 copies of Reread, but a 4th one could be coming. I think 3 is enough, but where it comes in very handy early in the game is Light Diffuse, Reread, Light Diffuse, already 10 firebombs in the opponent's deck, already around 1/6 chance of them drawing a firebomb. So Wrath of Caiaphas on average deals 5 damage. Obviously you want to go for more, and obviously you want to play against decks that just draw a lot of cards. These are the main firebomb-ish and reflection-ish interactions. There is just one more thing, one more cool interaction when it comes to having your opponent draw more cards, and that is Maul, a card that people sometimes are not expecting outside of some Elysian Nightmaul decks. But here it is a huge part in dealing a lot of damage. So it is a 6 costing primal slow spell that deals 2 damage to the enemy player for each card in their hand. And if you refill the opponent's hand with Wrath of Caiaphas, or if you make them draw additional cards, this is just additional damage. So you are turning the disadvantage of Reflection and kind of Wrath of Caiaphas into advantage. And that is what the base idea behind this deck was. Most of the other cards are just control pieces that you can find in a stock Spellcrack deck, and if you're playing your first game against an opponent who does not know this deck, they are probably thinking you could be playing Spellcrack and they might just get blown out by a maul or you not having your static bolts, etc., etc. So when it comes to the other cards, so what are we running here? 4 copies of Jack, Mercenary Hunter, the shotgun dude, the 3 costing triple fire, 2/3 gunslinger. When Jack hits the enemy player, create and draw a treasure trove. Summon, you may pay 1 and discard a card to deal 2 damage to 2 enemies. Or if it's a sigil, Jack gets double damage, which means he deals 4 damage to 2 enemies. Remember, these could be units, these could be sites, these could be players. Now, I've already talked about Milos, and I am including Milos here because he is a torch, usually he's a torch to the face, and he also puts a firebomb into the opponent's deck. And as I started saying, dealing 25 just with light diffuses and firebombs is very difficult. The main thing about how this deck wins is that it pokes and prods and tries to deal small amounts of damage to the opponent over time. 2 damage from Jack, 3 damage from Milos, 2 damage from Transpose, a couple of firebombs, and ooh, the opponent is in maul range. And this is what this deck is all about, just pinging and prodding and pincing and whatever nasty things. You can even throw in a swirly if you don't like your opponent, but I would advise against that. It is just, you have to deal small amounts of damage over time and just wait for those firebombs. And how you wait? Well, by controlling the game. Then you have 4 copies of Permafrost, the usual 1 cost primal curse, stun the cursed unit for as long as it's cursed. You've seen this a million times in my videos, at least this card. 3 copies of Garden of Omens. Sometimes I was running 4, right now I'm just running 3 just because I don't want to draw multiples early in the game. It is a 5 costing double fire, double primal sight that says your spells cost 1 less, which is very good. I mean, this means that if you play this on 5, you can tutor for Wrath of Caiaphas and play it on 6. Also, you get to play Meltdown, kill an enemy attachment, so you don't have to be running a lot of attachment removal outside from this. And if you play a Meltdown, this is already a spell in your void, and you can reread and you can kill another enemy attachment later on. You can protect the garden with an Ice Bolt, dealing 7 damage to a unit. Or the main mode is to resurface. Move a spell of your choice to the top of your deck. And here is another piece of cool interaction with Reflection. So if you're playing a Garden of Omens on turn 5, you have the option of resurfacing for a light diffuse, playing Reflection for 0, because remember your spells cost 1 less. You draw a light diffuse and, oh look, it costs 0 as well, because the cost of this card has been reduced as well. So that is a cool interaction that just fuels your rage and throws a ton of firebombs into the opponent's works. 4 copies of Torch, the classic 1 costing fire spell that deals 3 damage to a unit or player. 3 copies of Transpose. In some earlier versions of this deck, I mean, in the beginning I was running a couple of Transposes, then I just eschewed them, and here I'm running them again. Instead of Transposes, I was running several copies of Honor Claws, but right now there is just 1 copy in the market, because I was thinking, okay, usually on a neutral board state I am going for Honor of Claws because I want to draw multiple cards. But then I had several games in which I had those Honor of Claws, but I was not able to play them because I didn't have enough spare power or time, or I was already drawing tons of cards, or I was discarding those Honors of Claws to my Wraths of Caiaphas and they were redundant. And, well, dealing 2 damage to the enemy player is totally worth it. You gain an Aegis as a fast spell is very worth it, because one of the main enemies of this deck is a marketed Silverblade Menace. And also, well, you get to swap a card from your hand with a 4-cost card in your market, and this market is a thing of beauty. I'm going to get to it in a moment. 3 copies of Reread, I've already talked about them. 4 copies of Hailstorm, 3 cost, double primal spell, deal 3 damage to each unit. Sure, we've seen this a million times. 4 copies of Turn to Seed, the 3 cost double primal spell. Choose an enemy unit, transform it and each enemy copy into 0-2 seeds, including from their hand, deck, and void. After 5 turns, those little seeds grow and gain +5/+5 and overwhelm, so you need to kill them with jacks, or you need to kill them with hailstorms, but you have that ammunition to get rid of those seeds, to just weed them out. 4 copies of Wisdom of the Elders, the 3-costing double primal spell, fast spell that draws you 2 cards, plain and simple. 1 copy of Maul, 4 copies of Wrath of Caiaphas, and a power base consisting of 25 cards. Now, you don't have any Seek powers or petitions in this deck list, but you do have those Wraths of Caiaphas. So these are just slower Seek powers, kind of, sort of, that you are that you want to play early on because you don't want to get stuck on power, and you have something to do on your turn too. Because if you look at the power curve of this deck, it is a 1, it is a 3, and well, this is almost an odd-handed deck, if there is such a thing, aside from a reread, 3 copies of reread and 1 copy of Maul, honestly, and what you have in your market. But those Wraths of Caiaphas are also 2-drops, so there is that. Honestly, this deck is just running reflections instead of strategizes or similar things, and these reflections really come in very handy. I mean, that's kind of what this whole deck was about. As far as the power base goes, we have 4 copies of Skycrack Silex. This is an amazing piece of power. If you don't have all 20 Silexes yet, I would advise you to just use your Shift Stone correctly and just craft them. 4 copies of Crest of Fury because it's a rather slow controlling deck, and 4 copies of Skycrack Insignia because why not? You're just running those 2 colors in your deck. Well, 9 sigils. You want to have as many sigils as you can for Jack, but coupled waystones are also a thing of beauty. Face Aegis gets more and more important with each card Direwolf prints, digitally prints, obviously. Now, your best matchups are usually slow and dirtily decks that draw tons of cards. That's where Light Diffuse comes in very handy. One of your worst matchups, I believe, is Stone Scar with a lot of charge units and a lot of burn, direct burn to your face. I almost forgot to talk about the market. Now, the market is, as I said, a thing of beauty. You are running 2 units and 3 spells, but you have to remember, if you have Garden of Omens in play, all your spells cost 1 less, including those in your market. So if you have Garden of Omens in play and you play Transpose for 0, you can only grab Furnace Mage or Cannon Contained. Furnace Mage is a 4-costing double fire mage, a 4/3 unit, that on summon you get to kill an enemy attachment, and this comes in handy from time to time. So yeah, this is better than just not having anything there, obviously. 1 copy of Kenna Uncontained. Kenna is rather difficult to play because of the 4 primal influence. It is a 4/5 flying killer dragon shaman with an ultimate that you're usually not getting, but it is there when you have hit the enemy player with units 5 times, draw a spell from your void. That's cool, but you're usually not getting to that. You're just playing it for a 4/5 flying killer. And as far as spells go, you have 1 copy of Honor of Claws, 4 costing slow spell, draw 3 cards, then discard a card. 1 copy of Mortar, 4 costing Fire Primal fast spell, deal 4 damage to anything, could also be a sight. And having Mortar in the market means you can transpose, deal 2, play Mortar, deal 4. So honestly, your transpose and an additional card is kind of like an obliterate to the opponent's face. And why not have 1 copy of Rain of Frogs, the 4-costing primal spell that says you choose a non-power card from the enemy player's hand, transform each copy in their hand, deck, and void into 1/1 Frogs with Destiny. One might also want, instead of Rain of Frogs, to just play Unexpected Results in your market, but I believe it is much better to just trash a card from the opponent's hand than do maybe something and maybe give them a couple more firebombs, but you're not sure. That is why Rain of Frogs is here in the market instead of the other one. Now, this deck has a lot of smaller and bigger interactions and combos and pieces. Like, for example, I like to keep Reflection in my hand and not just play it on turn 1. unless I am low on power. Although, once I put at least 5 firebombs into the opponent's deck, sure, I'm gonna play Reflection already. But remember to place the firebombs first and then let the opponent draw them. Alright, so enough of me talking about generalizations. I'll just say one last thing about the name, the Smurf Garden. Do you remember Jokey Smurf? You will remember him in games 2 and 3, because game 1 doesn't have it, but in games 2 and 3 I even have a special overlay on my Twitch stream, so especially for this deck. Anyway, without any further ado, here's the Smurf Garden in action. Get to Smurfin', or something like that. Alright, this is an interesting hand, but it's kind of a slow hand, but I'm willing to keep it as I am going first. I can just play Wrath of Caiaphas to cycle it for a power on turn 2. On turn 3 I can cycle another one and go for Permafrost. The only thing this hand is actually lacking is some better card draw, but well, I can always jack the opponent's face and get a treasure trove. And it seems I'm playing against some kind of tradition control. And yeah, I'm thinking of playing Wrath of Caiaphas, sorry, to get a non-depleted power source, because in this deck only 4 Crests of Fury come into play depleted, usually, unless it's turn 1 and you're playing a Silex, but in this case I had already 2 and 1. If I would draw a Silex, I would go for Crest of Fury and not play Light Diffuse then. But as it stands, just Fire Sigil and I can do that. My next turn is going to be a slow one. Fortunately, I drew a reread, so I'm just looking here, getting a power. I think I would discard it anyway, so I'm thinking of just putting it on the bottom of the deck, and I want to reread for Light Diffuse for the opponent to have 10 Firebombs in their deck now. And given the opponent is probably playing a slow and dirtily control deck, and hey, there is one. There's the first one. 4 more out of 9. Elysian Silex, yes, opponent, please draw a card. Now, the thing about cards like cards that draw and do something like Strategize, Honor of Claws, and Besiege the Throne are that they can kind of diffuse a firebomb. And what I mean by that is, if you strategize and you draw 2 cards and you can put the Destiny Firebomb on the bottom of your deck and you're not getting blown up, which is sad panda territory. And for example, if you have Honor of Claws, you can draw 3 and discard the Firebomb, and it isn't getting Destinied, which we call in slang diffusing the bomb. Okay, in the meantime, opponent is playing World Pyre into Martyr's Chains, into killing that Jack, but we can still play Milos, deal 3 to the opponent, place another Firebomb in their deck, so now they have 10. Now they have 9, but they've already drawn 2. And seems they have a stop, which means they have some sort of a fast spell. That is always good to know. Cobalt Waystone. Now the opponent has Face Aegis, it doesn't stop the damage from their own Firebombs to getting dealt to them. They are able to play Aid the Huru already. Having 2 8/8s. Now I could go for Garden of Omens into Turn to Seed, which is an interesting idea. And right now I want to resurface for one of the Wraths of Caiaphas. I will redraw my hand into 7 beautiful new ones. The opponent has Face Aegis, but if I play Turn to Seed on one of their units, both of them are getting Turn to Seed, and it doesn't matter if the opponent doesn't have any Owls in their deck, they still lose Face Aegis. Unfortunately, opponent plays Equivocate in response to that, which means the rest of the effect doesn't proc because, well, Turn to Seed didn't find its target. I also played the 7th power because next turn, if they kill the garden, we can still Wrath of Caiaphas, hopefully drawing a power and a permafrost to deal with the owl, because I'm guessing they will try to kill the site. Taurite Test Pilot. Well, opponent, you wanted it. A second World Pyre just in case. I mean, the opponent is fully comboing out, and, well, I still think we are in a decent position. I was thinking whether to play that Turn to Seed or not, or to play Wrath of Caiaphas now. But I wanted to go for... because Turn to Seed gets rid of their face Aegis, but if I play Wrath of Caiaphas, I get a new hand, and I can start doing something starting next turn. So for me, this is going to be Silex. Opponent lost their face Aegis, which is also a huge benefit here. And fortunately we drew an undepleted power and a permafrost, so we took care of the owl. Even without that, we were still able to live through the turn. Calibrate, sure, let them draw cards. Opponent, you can draw as many cards as you want, you can even draw your whole deck out. It will not do you any good, I believe. Yeah, so they are going for max value on Taurite Test Pilot. Getting us down to 20. Getting the Test Pilot up to a 10-10. But we can turn it to Seed and jack it away. Opponent has 7 cards in hand, so Maul only deals 14. So we can Torch Face and go for Maul, but it doesn't solve the whole problem yet. And we can do this. They lose their face Aegis, even though they don't have any more Taurite Test Pilots in their deck. I will get rid of Hailstorm because it doesn't do anything. We will deal 2 points of damage to the opponent. They are down to 17. I could Torch now, but I'm thinking of just keeping the Torch so that if they have another face Aegis, I can Torch and Maul. And that's it. Alright, they are drawing a Firebomb, so they are down to 12. It's 3 Firebombs out of 11, as far as I remember. But also Milos did some damage. Jack is trying to do some damage. Maul is trying to do some damage. Torch is trying to do some damage. So even though the opponent gained some armor off of 8 of the Huru and Taurite Test Pilots, we are still just chipping away. Yes, Reflection doesn't get stopped by face Aegis, by the way. Temporal Distortion, okay. Now, here was my biggest gripe. I was thinking most of the opponent's spells draw them more cards, right? So even though they have stops for sure now, if I play Maul upstairs, they will still have at least 5 cards. So I wanted to go for that with the backup plan of reread them all. Opponent only has 4 attack on the board, so if I don't kill them, they probably won't be able to kill me in return. So I was thinking Maul first, see what happens. They do have a stop, because, well, they do have fast spells. And now we can Torch for the remaining 3 damage. In response, the opponent is going to play Channel the Tempest on our face to a very fiery conclusion. So instead of our Torch killing them, they wanted to kill themselves in a very fine way. So, yeah. Alright, on to game number 2 now. As you can see, it is from a from a later stream, sorry. This game is not from the future yet. So yeah, we have the Smurf Garden overlay of the number of played bombs and the number of exploded firebombs. You are welcome. Alright, let's start with just a crest. Wisdom of the Elders, that is a fine sight to behold. I'm going for a fire sigil because I could draw a primal source and go for that and maximize it, but in the end I did not go for that. Seems like the opponent is on a shadow heavy version of Feln, so let's just draw 2 cards. It is very important for this deck to to play power on each and every turn, hence Wrath of Caiaphas. I could have also went for Wisdom of the Elders, but I wanted to make sure that I will play a power. Opponent did not have a power drop, so they are stuck on 4. Not drawing any power, so we can still light the fuse. Firebombs are planted, as you can see on the overlay. Thank you, Jokey. Reflection. So here is the ordering. We're playing Reread, we're playing Light the Fuse, we're putting 5 additional Firebombs into the opponent's deck, and then we'll allowing them to draw a card. So they are that much closer to drawing a nasty surprise, eh? Not yet, but there will be more bombs to come. And we are both stuck on 4. Opponent going for Vara's favor up to 5. Still not playing any threats. So let's go Wisdom of the Elders. Let's go, let's go. Yeah, I was thinking about the ordering here, which is why I already have a Revenged Reflection somewhere on top of my deck. So I went for Light the Fuse first, then for a Wisdom in case I draw that Destiny Reflection, allowing the opponent to draw an additional card. And you know what? Here's that Reflection. So why not? I mean, it's not a Firebomb, but still. Now I have 10 cards in hand, so Reflection would be the obvious choice, but then I would have to discard a card, which is why I just go Torch Face. Getting from 26 to 23 means 1 fewer Firebomb is necessary. There is one here, down to 18, and another one follows suit. So 2 out of 15 have exploded already, 3 more are needed, and we already have a Wrath of Caiaphas in hand, which means, yes, I would like to draw 2 power as soon as possible, and play that Wrath of Caiaphas and allow the opponent to get as much power as they want, and as many new cards as they want, because 13 of them are still Firebombs. So yeah, let's play that Reflection. We get a Sigil. So I'm going to go Skycrag Insignia, go for Jack, discard. That was not a good choice. I think I should have ditched a Hailstorm because I won that 7th power. Opponent is transposing in response, which means, well, yeah, the damage is not getting dealt and we are not getting a treasure trove, which makes me a sad panda. This was a slight misplay. I think I should have ditched a Hailstorm. We could still Torch Face, but we don't have to. But we can. This means the opponent can just draw 2 Firebombs and that's it. Now what the opponent does is they play at any cost on our unit, killing it, getting them up to 13. So we still need 3 Firebombs. Fun fact, the Insignia comes into play depleted because, well, they have fire cards in their deck. Alright, fortunately, I was able to top deck a non-depleted power source. And let's go for a high roll of Wrath of Caiaphas. This is the highest roll you'll ever see. Okay, at any cost in response, that's a good play for sure. But there is a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And the opponent is down to 1. But they will draw 3 cards still out of those 3 Destiny Firebombs. And our Destiny Reflection. So they're drawing 4 cards and there is another Firebomb. And another Firebomb. That's a 5 Firebomb Wrath of Caiaphas. That is the highest of my high rolls. Oh my goodness. Let's get the Smurf out of here and let's go to game number 3. And for my final act, I will redraw this hand, as 1 power is not enough. It is indeed not enough. 2 power, slightly more like it. Probably starting on a crest. If I was going second, I would start on Insignia and light the fuse. Oh wait, I still start on Insignia and light the fuse. Trying to get 1 card deeper before I have to scout. You could go one way, you could go the other way. Fortunately, that was a cobbled waystone. And another light the fuse is always a welcome sight. The opponent started on a Stone Scar banner, which means they are probably just playing Stone Scar, which is, as I said, I think my worst matchup. And in this situation, we are facing 3 damage. But what I'm thinking here is playing Torch and Light the Fuse leaves me with a lot of 3 costing cards. What if I just go Wisdom of the Elders now, and next turn I can either Hailstorm and Light the Fuse, or Torch and Turn to Seed, or do a combination of a 3 and a 1 if I draw power. And this makes it kind of easier for me to draw power. Or, well, yeah, I'm trying. Also, the opponent is not playing another unit, which is also making it easier for me. A Fire Sigil is a good sight. And the second one is also. I'm thinking between Hailstorm and Torch, and I'm thinking Torch is costing less, which is why I want to go for Hailstorm here. No, Reflection? Reflection and Torch, also good. Also good. Jack, Mercenary, Hunter, yeah, but we still need to get rid of that one. This stop means that the opponent is playing a Condemn, a Blazing Salvo, or an Annihilate. And it is a Condemn. Unirunin and an Instigator. And a Shadow Sigil, sure. Phoenix Stone, that's what they've gotten. Okay, makes sense. Now with 2 jacks in hand, I was thinking, okay, I can just shoot both of their units. I could Hailstorm and then have a jack, but with them having a Phoenix Stone, I was thinking of just killing the 3/3 with jack, because I want to have that treasure trove. I want to draw an additional card. Probably for it being power or something like that. Also dealing 1 damage to them because of the Instigator's ability. Phoenix Stone, yeah, that's going to be harsh. They probably have another Condemn because of that attack. No, they have a Spiteful Strike. Yeah, that's a problem, because they are gaining health and their unit survives. But this Transpose actually means that I can deal with Phoenix Stone, because I have that friggin' Furnace Mage in the market. So my play right now is going to be Transpose, turn probably Treasure Trove because it's not an answer, turn it into Furnace Mage, play Furnace Mage, destroy their Phoenix Stone, and have a beater in play as well. Well, the upside of Phoenix Stone is that its activation costs 3 now, which does not allow the opponent to do much more. And yet another jack. Okay, let's grab that Phoenix Stone. And there's a Firebomb. Thank you, Jokey, for helping out. Now they're playing a jack. Fortunately, they don't have a Sigil, which just takes our Face Aegis away. And we're getting a Light the Fuse. Cool. Let's get rid of all their jacks. Attack now. Could have done it the other way around to ensure more damage. Play Crest of Fury. That Permafrost might be necessary if they get a Champion of Chaos or something like that, because Jack can't get rid of it. and more firebombs for the opponent. There you go, up to 15. And there's a second one. Seek answers. If they draw non-power, they could draw Firebomb. Now their insignia comes into play, depleted because they have blue cards in their deck. Yeah, I'm discarding a Jack because I want to have that permafrost just in case. And this is going to allow us to attack for 4. We're not getting a treasure trove for our troubles, but maybe a Firebomb to finish the game off. And there we go. There we go indeed. That's Smurf Garden for you. Now let's head on top and talk about the deck some more. The deck that got me to Diamond 1 this month. Ladies and gentlemen, the Smurf Garden. We can plant bombs, we can plant seeds, and nothing good is going to happen. Note on interaction of what this deck is doing to your opponent's deck, because I forgot to mention it in the previous explanation, in the explanation part. So, usually, I try to go for Light Diffuse as soon as possible, even turn 1. So if I can go turn 1, play Light Diffuse, I try to do so. If I have Crest and Insignia and a Light Diffuse, if I'm going first, it depends. If I'm going second, yes, I want to go for Insignia and Light Diffuse. And here's a couple of reasons. First, although Even-Handed Golem has been nerfed to the ground, opponent can still be playing an Even-Handed Golem deck, which means if you put a lot of one-costing Firebombs in there, they're just not going to draw cards from EHG, and they're going to have a bad time. Another fact, if you're playing Light Diffuse and you're putting Firebombs into the opponent's deck, and they're playing a 2-faction deck, let's say Huru, you're turning off their insignias, because they have fire cards in their deck. Later in the game, you also have Turn to Seed. Later, I mean at turn 3 and onwards. And that one puts blue cards into the opponent's deck, which can turn off insignias as well, as you've seen in the last game. Turn to Seed can turn off a Stonescar insignia just off entirely. So those are some small additional interactions that mess with your opponent's game plan and timing. I mean, I myself have fallen to the victim of my insignia coming into play depleted because I forgot a Milos attacked me. So there is that. And you might be missing that crucial piece of power that you need to stay alive, stay alive. Who knows? Anyway, this deck has been great for me. It did get me from Diamond 3 to Diamond 1 this month, in August 2020. Already trying to get it to Master and Throne as well. But you have to remember that variance, although variance is inherent to all card games, for this deck, even more so. Because you're putting just a couple of Firebombs into a huge deck that the opponent has, and even though you're putting 10, 15, 20 odd Firebombs into their deck, they might not draw any even after a Wrath of Caiaphas, or 2. It just might happen. That's why you have to see all the openings, all the small points of dealing 2 points of damage, 3 points of damage to the opponent, to finish them off when you can. It's not easy, being cheesy, but, well, this deck works. Finally, a working Firebomb deck, and I have to say I'm proud of myself. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this lengthy video. Thank you for watching, and remember, if you did enjoy it, click on subscribe. That is going to help me a lot. Alright, cheers, and see you next time on Deck Check.